Before we start, I need to make a revision to a score I made in the previous game's reflections. There we go, much better. You know what I love talking about? Video games. Specifically, video games I've played. Even more specifically, games I've played this year. This is my Games Reflections of 2020, and we're going to be talking about what I've played this year. Welcome to part 2, which has games I played in the second half of the year. So anything played in July through December is going to be on this list. A link to part 1 will be in the description. We have a lot of games to cover, so let's get on with it. So, Xenoblade. I already played through the first game in 2018 and talked about it during the first game's reflections. But this year, Monolith Soft re-released the game as Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Indeed, this version of the game is the definitive experience of the game. Better looking models and environments compared to the original game, side quest waypoints so you don't have to have the wiki pulled up every 5 minutes, re-recordings of songs that make the game sound new and fresh. With all of these improvements and more, they make this version the version to play. Plus, Definitive Edition adds a time attack mode to fight bosses and enemies in the game, which gives an extra challenge for those who want extra fights that are more difficult, as well as an epilogue for the game, Future Connected. A bonus chapter that takes place 1 year after the main game on a continent that was not previously explored in the game. Let's talk about it briefly since it's new and I already talked about the main game in 2018's Games Reflections. Like I said already, Future Connected takes place 1 year after the events of the main game, so if you don't want spoilers for the main game, play this afterwards. Now, this epilogue felt less like an epilogue to the story and more like a little victory lap to celebrate the end of the game. You follow Shulk and Melia as they're on their way to the Alchemoth capital in the junk ship. But they're shot down before they can reach the Hyantia capital, and land on the Bionis shoulder instead. As you later find out, this is due to a creature known only as the Fog King. As you're making your way across the Bionis shoulder to the capital, you encounter characters from side quests of the main game. And I really like how they're expanded into bigger characters this time around in voice-acted cutscenes. It would have been nice if they were given a little more to do, but the expansion of characters and world building is still appreciated. There are some game mechanics that are changed for the epilogue, which threw me for a loop, but it does separate it from the main game and makes it feel like its own mini Xenoblade game. If you want to further separate it though, you'll want to try not to play as Shulk, since I'm fairly certain in saying that most everyone probably spent the majority of the main game playing as him anyways. Future Connected is Melia's story anyways, so it may end up working better that you play as her for the most part. I'm going to give Xenoblade Definitive Edition, as a whole, 9.7 out of 10. Every new thing to this version enhances it in ways I didn't think were necessary when I played the original. But they did it anyways, and I'm so happy for that. But as I'm writing this, I think I was kind of let down by Future Connected. The story wasn't as good as the original game, and Melia was a lot more soft-spoken, which made me think that she had a different voice actor for the longest time. But it was still pretty fun to play, and seeing Alchemoth after a whole year had passed was a trip to be sure. Wow, this was a way longer review than I meant to do. I apologize, but also not, because this is Xenoblade, a series that I love dearly and will likely continue to for years to come. Following up one of my most anticipated games for this year is another one I was super hyped about when it was announced earlier this year. Shantae and the Seven Sirens. This game. I genuinely love this game. It combines some of the best parts of Pirate's Curse with the gorgeous hand-drawing visuals of Half Genie Hero. This is the Shantae game I've been waiting for since Half Genie Hero was announced. Sorry, I love you, Half Genie Hero, but Pirate's Curse was better. Shantae and the Seven Sirens brings the series back to its roots with its classic interconnected Metroidvania world, and has a quick, fluid gameplay while also not sacrificing the animal transformations that the series is best known for. This game also brings back labyrinths, dungeons with puzzles to solve and keys to collect in order to get through the dungeon. The interconnected world and the labyrinths were some of my favorite things about the previous games, and I was a little disappointed that Half Genie Hero was more like Mega Man X with separated levels and a stage select instead. Along with all that, the animal transformations are brand new, and you can also get magic spells that will help in finding items all across the map and getting to new locations. I do have 2 complaints though. When you get a collectible, it doesn't show on the map that you got it, so you'll want to get a map online and mark down yourself when you get a new collectible if you want 100%. Otherwise, you'll be hunting down which ones you do and don't have, which could take a very long time. The other complaint I have with this game is the long load times. I'm not sure if this is a PC version thing, but every time you enter a different sector of the map, you enter a long loading screen that can take like 15 to 20 seconds to finish loading the area. Considering how much you're going from section to section, that can be kind of annoying to deal with. Like I said though, that could honestly be a PC only issue and not a thing that happens on console. If WayForward fixed those 2 issues though, I could confidently say that this would be the perfect Shantae game. And that's pretty impressive because I can see those 2 things being pretty easy fixes with patches. 9.7 out of 10. This is probably my favorite game in the Shantae series. I don't really have anything else to say about the game here other than the fact that when the game starts up, it has an amazing intro animated by Studio Trigger. Yes, that's Studio Trigger, and I think that's pretty cool. I don't usually play a lot of run-and-gun arcade games, but 2020 is full of new and unexpected experiences. Metal Slug 3. It's a pretty short game, but it's an arcade game, so it's designed to munch on coins. Luckily for me, the version I played has unlimited quarters, so I don't have to start from the beginning of the game every time I lost all my lives. I honestly don't know how any kid would have been able to finish this game in an arcade without spending their entire allowance, because unless you're really good, you're gonna die a lot. There isn't a lot of story here, but you're fighting an opposing army with guns and tanks, and eventually you find out that it was aliens inciting war between your armies so they could take over the Earth or something? I don't know. This game is the kind of 90s ridiculousness that's just great nonsense. While you are dying a lot, it feels pretty good to control. I don't play a lot of run-and-gun games, but Metal Slug 3 seems like it's a pretty good representation of the genre. 7.5 out of 10. I had an alright time with this game. Metal Slug 3 is a good time, being able to be beaten within a short 2-hour period. If you want a good run-and-gun game to play in an afternoon, I can safely say this is a good choice to play. So I did technically beat this game as a kid, but that was over 15 years ago with the help of siblings, and honestly I'm not even sure if I'm the one that beat it, so I'm counting this as game clear for this year. Tak and the Power of Juju. It's kinda weird, to be honest. It's a 3D platformer collectathon. You play as Tak in this jungle village where all of its residents have been turned into sheep by an evil shaman of the village. Obviously that's not great, so you must find a way to turn all of the villagers back into their normal selves and stop the villainous Tlaylock. The platforming itself doesn't feel that bad, honestly. In fact, that's probably the most solid part of the game. The weirdness mostly comes from the characters, their dialogue, and the quote-unquote story. The thing is, this game's characters and story rely heavily on comedy, and a good 90% of that comedy comes from toilet humor. I'm not a fan at all of relying completely on toilet humor, which this game very much does at points. But nevertheless, I pressed on because this game, for the most part, did control pretty well. However, the game did get pretty rude towards the end of the game, having unforgiving checkpoints, annoying enemies, and certain game mechanics that didn't feel like they worked as intended. With all of this in mind, I'm giving this a flat 7 out of 10. This was honestly a good palate cleanser for me, especially after having played both Xenoblade Definitive Edition and Shantae back-to-back. I needed a good neutral game. The platforming actually did feel fairly good, and the level design made sense for the most part. But a word of warning, if you play this game, do not go for 100% completion. There are these balls that you have to collect 100 of to beat the game at a certain point. There are 200 of them in total throughout the game. There's no way to track which ones you've collected, and there are some that are in a snow/sandboarding minigame that are insanely difficult to grab. But as a 3D collectathon, it's pretty alright. It's a product of the time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, Link's crossbow training. In short, it's good. You play as Link from Twilight Princess. You have a crossbow. You shoot targets. This game was mostly made to promote the Wii Zapper accessory, and it's actually a pretty good value for what it is. There are 9 levels with 3 stages each, and honestly, it can get a bit tough at times. Even though it was made for the Wii Zapper, you don't need it to play the game, which is nice. Especially since this game is harder to find with the Zapper included, and without it, it's pretty cheap. Like $2 to $3 cheap. That's what I mean when I say this game has pretty good value, because being fun to play, having a good replay value, being fairly difficult, and being cheap is a pretty good combination. Flat 8 out of 10. I had fun with Link's crossbow training. It is pretty short, but like I said, it has fairly good replay value with trying to get the best scores you can get. I liked it. Here's another short game, 36 Fragments of Midnight. It's a platformer. You're this white glowing cube called Midnight. You platform through this maze collecting these star fragments, 36 of them to be exact, hence the name 36 Fragments of Midnight. What's neat about this game is that the layout is different every time you play and changes every time you die. It plays well, it's aesthetically pleasing, and it has some replayability in its constantly changing map. The only problem with this game is that it's painfully short, being able to be completed in as little as 6 minutes. However, it's a pretty cheap game. I picked it up on the eShop for about $1, which I'd say is a decent price for this short game. 7.5 out of 10. It's not a bad game. Like I said, the only real problem is the game's length. But in addition to that, the game doesn't have any real background music. Hence why I added Fur-Elise into the background instead of any real music from the game. Because there isn't any. Other than that, I enjoyed this game. If you know me, you should know by now that I love my Metroidvanias. Well, here's another one. Ori and the Blind Forest, Definitive Edition. I've played the original game before, but if I'm including Xenoblade Definitive Edition, I'm including this. You're this cute little light monkey creature called Ori, who must restore the forest to its former glory, which was ravaged by an owl of darkness, Kuro. What can I say about this game other than, what a fantastic game. Between the gorgeous environments and worlds, the amazing music, the super fun and fluid gameplay, the wonderful story, I find it incredibly difficult to find many things wrong with this game. On top of Ori just being a great game in the first place, the Definitive Edition not only removes all points of no return, which annoyed me in the original game, but it also adds a whole new area as well as 2 new abilities and a fast travel system. All of these additions truly make this game the definitive version of Ori and the Blind Forest. 9.8 out of 10. I love playing the original Ori and the Blind Forest, and this game makes the experience an even better time. But the one thing I really disliked about this game is the map being as detailed as it was messed with how dark areas of the map meant you haven't been there yet. The detailing made it difficult to tell which areas I have and have not been to yet, and since the game tracks that on the map, it made it a little annoying to fully clear out some areas. That's honestly my only real complaint. I had a fantastic time playing this game, and I truly believe that if you play this game, you'll be in for a real treat. On to another game that's beautifully drawn and animated. Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. You're a kid from Motorville named Oliver who has traveled to another world, a world full of magic, monsters, and many a wondrous sight, in order to undo a tragedy that happens early on in the story. On this most magical adventure, Oliver learns many spells and becomes a wizard in his own right, which I'm a fan of. I like that the main character is a mage instead of that being relegated to a support role and the main character being a knight or something. I feel like that sets Ni no Kuni apart from other JRPGs like it, even if it's just a little bit. Apart from the spell casting, the other big battle mechanic of the game is familiars. You can befriend monsters in order to have them fight for you. And if I'm being honest, you will be using familiars to fight for you for the majority of the game. The great thing about familiars is there are 300 of the little guys that you can choose from, with many abilities for them to learn. So, lots of variety and options. Or, if you just want to collect all of the familiars just for completion's sake, you can totally do that. The battles are fun and engaging, the world is vast and ripe for exploring, and the story is pretty top-notch. I also really like how side questing is done, with errand stations being in every town that tells you if there's a side quest you can start somewhere in the world. It's not so specific that it tells you exactly where to go, but it lets you figure it out yourself. And like I said before, the exploration is great in this game and feels super rewarding when you find things, as a result of going off the beaten path. Along with the story being great, it's filled to the brim with fun and unique characters to interact with. 9.5 out of 10. All in all, Ni no Kuni is a fun game and a really good experience. If there's one thing I really dislike though, is that if you've input an action in battle that takes time to do, and an enemy or even an ally does something that has a cinematic animation, it completely overwrites what you're doing and you have to select the command again and start the action over from the beginning. I cannot count how many times I almost lost a battle because that happened when that one action would have ended it there and then. While the game does get difficult at times, and I like that it isn't a complete cakewalk, I feel like that adds a level of artificial difficulty and annoyance that isn't necessary at all. But I digress, Ni no Kuni is a fantastic time. I generally don't play a lot of visual novels because they don't always have the most gameplay. That's not the case with this next game, however. Valhalla, cyberpunk bartender action. This game is rated M for mature for strong language, sexual themes, and strong use of tobacco and alcohol. You're Jill, a bartender in the neon-lit city of Glitch City. The cyberpunk setting was really fun and it made for some very interesting clientele, like cyborg assassins or android pop stars or even rough and tough catgirls. Generally, visual novels have to have a really strong narrative to succeed, and I can safely say that Valhalla does an excellent job in telling a story. Not only that, but it has good gameplay with serving drinks and figuring out what orders patrons want when they're vague. And orders will be pretty vague at points. On top of that, you're also managing money so that you can afford things that Jill wants so that she'll be less distracted at work so you'll be able to see hints as well as managing what bills you can pay. As well as all of that, there's multiple endings to the game, so there's incentive to play Valhalla multiple times, which is very nice. 9.7 out of 10. I had an absolute blast playing through Valhalla. Compared to other visual novels, this game is very involved in its gameplay, and I love that. I mentioned already that the story is great, but I didn't mention how freaking funny Valhalla is. I cannot count how many times this game made me burst out laughing with its dialogue and the quirky characters. I will warn once again that this game's subject matter and language is very mature, so it won't be for everyone. That being said, I loved it. Related to the story and narrative, I'll praise Valhalla for not being afraid at all to talk about difficult topics like death, existentialism, and political subject matter. I'll also give the game props for having a lot of LGBTQ+ representation because that's pretty cool. Once again, I have no good segue, so here's Punch-Out for the Wii. Punch-Out is plain and simple a boxing game series. The Wii installment is the latest in the series and uses motion controls as it's a Wii game. As Little Mac, you fight 13 boxers from across the globe, each with their own patterns and special moves that you have to overcome. There's 3 circuits in this game: Minor Circuit, Major Circuit, and World Circuit, each of them getting progressively more difficult. I'll fully admit I had a lot of trouble with this game. World Circuit was so difficult that it took me ages to find the motivation to get back to the game. But when I realized how close to the end I was, I pushed on. I will give a tip right here that will help a lot. Use practice mode in exhibition matches. It may be an obvious thing, but you can better learn the patterns and attacks if you're having trouble and don't want to have a ton of losses under your belt. Another tip that may help is motion controls aren't required to play. You can turn the Wii remote sideways if you're not a fan of motion controls, but I personally really like the motion controls in Punch-Out! Along with career mode, exhibition matches let you refight opponents that you've already fought, and exhibition matches have side missions to complete. Along with that, once you've beaten the career mode, title defense mode is unlocked, where you can refight boxers, but at a higher difficulty where they'll be faster and they'll have new gimmicks that you'll have to overcome. And if that's not enough, head-to-head mode lets you fight multiplayer matches against your friends. So yeah, loads of content for a boxing game. 9 out of 10. Punch-Out! For the Wii is a real fun time. If you can find it anywhere, I recommend picking it up. Next Level Games did a great job in bringing Punch-Out! To the modern gaming era. In 2016, WayForward played an April Fool's Day prank that teased various silhouettes of characters from Smash Bros., which turned out to not actually be characters from Smash, but instead silhouettes of characters from this game. Catgirl without salad. This game is busy. It's a bullet hell shoot 'em up with aspects of turn-based RPGs, rhythm games, golf games, 2D platformers, arcade games, and puzzle games. You may be thinking, well, how in the heck does that even work? Let me show you. It's a shooter, but our main character, Kabiko, gets power-ups to her blaster that gives genre elements to your blaster. So, for example, to shoot more powerful shots, you'll be playing a DDR reminiscent rhythm game, or you're shooting golf balls at your enemies using golf game mechanics. Or you choose actions to hit opponents from a menu like turn-based RPGs of old. So clearly, Catgirl without salad has a lot going on. But I had fun with the different shooting mechanics and the goofy dialogue. 8.5 out of 10. I will say that this game is unique. There's no denying that. This game is very short though, and that's not actually a bad thing at all in this case. Because if it was much longer, I feel like it might have worn out its welcome because of how busy of a game it is. It's a nice short romp through 3 semi-challenging levels, with unique mechanics for a shoot-'em-up. And it makes sense that it's short as it is, since the whole game was an April Fool's Day prank. Out of all of the Pokemon games that I own, there's only one that I haven't beaten yet. That is, until this year. Pokemon Conquest. Welcome to the Ransei region, a land reminiscent of feudal Japan, devoid of the advanced technology that is well known in the Pokemon games. No Pokeballs, no Pokemon centers, no Pokemon storage. Instead, warriors here link with a Pokemon's heart to have them join their group. And if they resonate strong enough with the warrior or warlord, they can attain even greater strength. Now, Pokemon Conquest is a crossover game between Pokemon and Nobunaga's Ambition, a strategy game. So this game, in turn, is a strategy game with Pokemon elements thrown in. You are a nameless warlord, who is tasked with stopping the fearsome warlord Nobunaga and his Zekrom from attaining the legendary Pokemon and using it to destroy the region by taking over each of the 17 kingdoms in the land. You must travel from kingdom to kingdom, capturing each of the castles to unite them under your control before Nobunaga has the chance to. I don't play a lot of strategy games like this, but I enjoyed it. That's mostly because of the Pokemon part of it held my attention for long enough to get through the battles. Like I said, I'm not usually one to play strategy games like this, so I'm not sure it would have been enough to hold my attention completely without the Pokemon part in this game. And because this setting is feudal Japan, the dialogue and story is kinda dry? It makes sense for the setting and time period, but it never grabbed my attention that well. So I only really found this game okay, 7.5 out of 10. I did find some fun in assembling a team of strong warlords in Pokemon, and figuring out what works on what maps was enjoyable enough, but this was kind of a dry experience. However, what happens in the final battle was unexpected and I really enjoyed it. Pokemon Conquest was also a pretty challenging game for how simplified of a game it was, and I like that. Speaking of warriors, let's see what happens to those who aren't able to face a warrior's death. Yotan Valhalla Edition. In this beautifully hand-drawn game, you are fighting for your right to be accepted into Valhalla after suffering a death unbefitting of a warrior. Because if you don't face a warrior's death, you cannot be accepted into Valhalla. You are Thora, a Viking who has perished at sea in a ferocious storm. The gods have given you a chance to earn your right to enter Valhalla, the afterlife for Norse warriors who have fallen in battle. Impress the gods by defeating the Yotan, colossal giants with incredible power and might. Before you can face the Yotan, you must first find their respective relics in their mazes. Along the way, you can also gain the powers of the gods to help you on your way. And you will definitely want to acquire these powers because, oh boy! The Yotan can be quite arduous to fight. The combat is fairly simple, with a light attack, a slow heavy attack, and your godly powers. It can feel a tad sluggish at a few points, but it doesn't feel bad at all, and it makes sense for a powerful Viking like her. Throughout the game, you can also find landmarks that impart knowledge of Norse mythology, which I'm really fond of. I love games that talk about mythology and legends. It's such a blast learning about all these different cultures and their legends. I rate this game a good 8.7 out of 10. While exploring all of these places, I did feel like controlling Thora could have stood to be a little faster because she is kind of slow movement-wise. Aside from that, not having a compass on the map of where you are perplexed me more than once, but it's not that difficult to piece together where you are on the map from the landmarks. It'll just take a bit of getting used to. Other than those two criticisms, my only complaint is that Yotan is short. You know you have a good game on your hands when the player wants more of the game to play. Although I haven't touched Valhalla mode yet, which is apparently a boss rush mode, so I do have something more to play, which is good. I like this game. It was short, but I had fun. Last year, I played the main game of this, and I thought it was about time that I finally played the DLC. Presenting The Messenger, Picnic Panic. Continuing from the main game of The Messenger, Picnic Panic has you playing as The Messenger in an alternate timeline on the tropical island of Budkin Island, to stop one of the bosses from the main game and his evil ambitions. This DLC is surprisingly pretty short, but at the same time it's really difficult. I especially had a hard time because I took nearly a year and a half between playing the main game and this, so I was really rusty. Although, I feel like these two aspects paired up together made a good combo. If it was longer, I would have been frustrated with it dragging on with its difficulty, and if it was easier, I would have felt underwhelmed because it's short. On top of that, this DLC is just as sarcastic and humorous as the main game, which the main game did excellently. My only problem is that there aren't any new abilities in this side adventure. It's not a huge problem since you already have so many different things you can do, but it's something I would have liked to see. 9 out of 10. I had fun. It was frustrating at points with the difficulty, but that just made it more satisfying when completing a difficult task. And what makes this even better is that Picnic Panic is free DLC if you own the game. Who can complain about free? So I haven't played a lot of 2D Sonic games. In fact, the only ones other than this next one that I've played is Sonic CD, and if it counts, Sonic Generations. So to say that I don't have a lot of 2D Sonic experience would be an understatement. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So this game, kinda rough. Being a 2D platformer in the early 90s, that's not incredibly surprising. But playing this for the first time in the year of 2020 definitely shows that there are some archaic game design choices that are best left in the past, such as limited continues and being unable to replay levels without cheat codes. That being said, the actual gameplay and the level design itself pretty good and fun to play. The most frustrating part, though, is definitely the bonus stages, which you need to complete in order to collect the Chaos Emeralds and get the good ending of the game. The reason being is that they're difficult with Tails getting hit and losing all the rings he's been helping you collect, and you only get one shot at the bonus stages per checkpoint. But if you do manage to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you can become supersonic once you get 50 rings in a stage and reach a certain speed, which is super satisfying to plow into enemies and fly over spikes with. That being said, this form can be hard to control because it builds up momentum so quickly, and you need to watch your ring count because your rings slowly deplete when Supersonic is unlocked. And if you run out of rings, you revert back to your regular, normal blue form. All in all, I enjoyed myself with this game. 7.5 out of 10. Because Sonic 2 came out in the early 90s, I'm not sure it's completely fair to judge it on modern game standards. Gaming has come a long way since this game has come out, and Sonic 2 definitely shows its age. Despite its rough edges though, Sonic 2 is fun. I just need to get better at the game in order to fully enjoy it. Speaking of gaming shames, here's another one. The only Banjo-Kazooie game I've played is Nuts and Bolts. However, since I don't have an N64 and I don't have plans to pick up an Xbox One just for retro replay, I can't exactly fix that at the moment. However, I can do the next best thing. Yooka-Laylee is made by the team behind Banjo-Kazooie. It's a 3D platformer collectathon very much in the vein of Banjo-Kazooie. You are Yooka and Laylee, a chameleon and a bat respectively, and you need to recover the magical pages from the evil corporate leader, capital B, before he can use them to rewrite the universe in his image, or so he claims. Along with pages, you also have a large variety of other collectibles to grab, including quails, ghost riders, and health and power expansions, among others to collect. Yooka-Laylee is fun. The movement and abilities are super satisfying to play with, and collecting stuff is fun. Also, all of the characters have good dialogue and are extremely self-aware, which is another important part of emulating Banjo-Kazooie. 9 out of 10. I had a good time playing Yooka-Laylee. Fluid gameplay that makes sense and fun abilities to play with will always earn points with me. And on top of that, the worlds are creative and just pleasant to explore. Cool stuff. My only real strike against this game are a few annoying minigames. Kartos' minecart tracks, and one Rextro minigame in the 4th world. They were just unfun and felt like unnecessary padding. But the rest of the game is just fun to play. I recommend it to anyone who likes 3D platformer collectathons. This is a game of red and blue, blue and red. This is Polarity. You are an unnamed hacker on a job to break into a digital bank, and you are being paid big for your efforts. You go through puzzles, collect data fragments, and that's it. You can switch the polarity of your color between red and blue, and use that to get through red and blue walls, avoid lasers, and stand on the opposite color platforms. You can also pick up cubes needed for puzzles and chuck them across the room, which is fun to do. This game is really short, but the puzzles are satisfying enough to complete. 7 out of 10. Honestly, there's not much else to say about the game, but it is fun, even if it has a few quirks, like cubes going through walls when they're not supposed to. Ah well, not a bad game in general, just kind of average. I wanted the final game of the year to be one that I was sure to enjoy to end the year off with a bang. So, next up, another legacy game that takes a lot of inspiration from a beloved series. Bug Fables, the Everlasting Sapling. It's hard to talk about this game without talking about Paper Mario, so please bear with me. It's incredibly obvious that Bug Fables takes a lot of nods from the Paper Mario series. So much so that I'd almost call this game Paper Mario 3. I know I may get a lot of flack from saying that because Super Paper Mario exists, but hear me out. I love Super Paper Mario. However, even the most avid fans of the game have to agree that that game is a huge departure in gameplay from how the games before it played. There's one question about legacy games like this that needs to be asked though. Does this game hold up well on its own without being attached to the series that it's based on? The answer is a resounding yes. Bug Fables is incredibly fun to play gameplay-wise, the characters are really well written and designed, the battles can be really difficult, requiring some smart strategy, the world is exceptionally enjoyable to explore, and the story is better than I could have possibly expected it to be. All in all, Bug Fables is a fantastic game in its own right. Saying that Bug Fables is just Paper Mario but with bugs is a disservice to Bug Fables because not only is it just wonderful on its own, but it also does some things differently and in some aspects even better than Paper Mario. Because there's only 3 party members, more character development and learning about the characters is able to happen. And because there's no silent protagonist, we're able to hear the characters' thoughts naturally without the other characters translating, which always felt really weird in Paper Mario. I'm giving Bug Fables a 9.8 out of 10. Just, what a fantastic game. I highly, highly recommend this game. I've had a lot of memorable adventures with the games I've played in 2020. Hopefully everyone watching this has had some good gaming experiences this year as well. I'd actually be really interested in hearing what you guys have played in 2020 down in the comments. On a separate note, I'm not going into the games I covered in the first half of the year this time around, because this video is long enough as it is and that just unnecessarily extended last year's end of year games reflections. I also want to say that I'm not sure I'm going to be keeping this format for next year, as it's just more work than I intended these videos to be when I first started doing games reflections. Splitting it into half year and end year helped, but then I started doing longer reviews as a result because I wanted my full thoughts out on paper, so to speak. Games Reflections is not by any means cancelled though, as I really like sharing what I've played throughout the year in the video format. Anyways, I hope you have a great 2021. It's a new year full of massive amounts of potential, even if good things don't happen right away in the new year.